This is IBM Museum. On a previous video, we ran the system information tool on a Type 1 Model 80, and that's the 16 megahertz version that initially came out. And it had a bug in the system information tool, or SIT. Just didn't have the correct planar ID to identify the system. So we saw a lot of the unknowns. Major Tom has gone through and updated the system information tool. So he came out with a revision C that corrects that fault. So I still have the Type 1 on the bench behind me, set up the same way. The only thing I've done is powered it on. I haven't even copied over the, I've got the diskette in the drive, but I haven't even copied over what I have as the name of that file. And I'll give a link to where you can download this version as well. So we're going to do a copy and we want this is the name that I've got it on the diskette. That didn't sound good at the start, but it was just, I guess, seeking. Okay. And then at the final end, we heard the little bit of thing for the hard drive. I can go through and I'll just have the diskette, the drive, and we will get right into running that system information tool. And we should see, and this is actually the first time I've ran it for the version that he's updated. So the information, such as all the adapter information, I want to look down and get down to the model and processor information. I mean, all the other details that we looked at in that previous video are likely the same. I can breeze through them in the same way. But let's look and see. There we go. And remember, the first patch that Major Tom did was to open up that where it has a space between model and 80 for that initial listing in the chart. And this is the very first entry in those in the supported models, even though it was not supported the way that it was written, having that bug. And then it has that system board ID, that POS ID of the FEFF at the bottom. And just is able to identify those hard-coded values of the CPU and the speed of the processor. And then I think it even goes through and fills in that I've got a 80387 FPU coprocessor in there as well, and model F8 submodel 00. That's what the Type 1 planar is to the Model 80. And then the BIOS revision of that 00, just like we saw in the previous video, and that BIOS state of late March of 1987. So that is corrected for the for this model now, and even for it being an unidentified model, we had all the nature for the supporting the listing of the ESDI hard drive controller that's in slot 8 is the only position we had filled, just like we saw in that previous video. But I mean, all that other information is at least corrected now. So this will run on a Type 1, that's 16 megahertz, 386DX CPU for factory. I have, of course, much that upgraded. That's the hard-coded value it does. So what I'm going to do next is the Type 2, which is a 20 megahertz Model 80. I've got one of those, and we're going to go through and run the system information tool on it. Now, it would have run without this bug fix, but it's just moving on through the models. So the next one that's going to be up, we'll just do the comparison to what this model is. And lastly, I have a Type 3. And that Type 3, I'll have to go through and put a hard drive on that unit. And that is a Type 3 is a 25 megahertz 386DX CPU from the factory. And then that's even got the 16 KB of cache, level 2 cache for the CPU right on the planar. So it makes that unit a little bit faster. It gives a little bit more better performance boost to have that 64 KB, just a very basic level, but it does have a cache on that unit. So, and that's going to be very similar, equal model placement to the Model 70s that we went through. And I have done the system information tool on the later Model 70 planar called the AXX, or that effectively the same comparison as the Type 3 Model 80 planar, having the same speed of processor and the same amount of that cache on that CPU daughter card. But I haven't run the lower end Model 70s through the system information tool yet. So I'm going to go through. I will go through and pause the video. We'll get the Type 2 up on the bench and go from there. Okay, and I'm back with this kind of the same arrangement where I have the Type 2 Model 80 laid out, cover off the side, even the front bezel off of the front, and I had some initial trouble. I mean, I've got the diskette drive hanging off, connected the same way, as I did for the Type 1, and that's just something I had to do. I went through and I had actually errors with the Adaptec controller, the Adaptec SCSI board, that I've got these two. In fact, I can go through, and that's why I'm kind of stammering. It's just having those issues. There's a little bit of you can see the Type 2, and of course the drives are a little bit higher, which so it makes them so it's not able to be viewed by what I have for the Skycam here. But I went through and I had errors from the Adaptec controller first, and just telling me it didn't find the adapter configuration. I had to go through, and the unit didn't have a battery in the very start, and so I knew I had to run the reference diskette. I knew I had to use my tweener system to get that ADF for the Adaptec controller, and so once it went through the configuration, it still didn't just want to boot from those hard drives. And so I had two more Adaptec controllers, and I guess I can show, that's effectively the front and back of the two I tried, and it's probably not good that I mix these up, although it's probably the same effect. They behaved worse than the controller I had in there. One didn't even register at all. I'm looking through and trying to see, if there's any corrosion or anything like that that's in place. It does have some capacitors, And then the other one identified, and I saw a 166 error for the first time. Instead of the 161, 162, 163, 165, I saw 166 error, and it identified some of the resources as on the system board. And I think there it may still be some corrosion or the adapter's just misbehaving. And I had these adapters paired together. I do have a few other Adaptec 1640s, they're nice standard SCSI controllers for microchannel. But I don't know if I got these as just defunct, that somebody's saying I can't get them to work, and so here you can have them. So I plugged in the original Adaptec board, and I got further, got it working, and it actually booted to something, and I'll probably not show it this time around, but I do have that System Information Tool diskette bootable, and of course the contents here, and the original version being sit.exe. There's the first patch of sit_A is the way I've got it marked out. The sit_B is the second patch, and then the sit_C is this last patch that we ran, and we ran it on the Type 1 Model 80. Now we're running on the Type 2, and this likely would have run even without necessarily the latest patch from Major Tom. And I want to see, I mean, the hard drives are being recognized now. I didn't boot from them. It wasn't a DOS boot. I want to see if the System Information Tool will identify maybe even a little bit of the operating system that is on those drives. And a little bit of spoiler, it's not OS2. It's a little bit more unique even than that. So we're going to look at the adapter ID first off. And in slot 7, I do have that passive external diskette adapter. That's just, there's no electronics for an adapter or any ADF that's associated with that. It's just a passive adapter that passes signals from the diskette drive side to an external 4869 -001 or 360 KB diskette drive, which I've got one here, but I don't have it plugged in this case. And then that Adaptec controller that I'm talking about. So let's look at some of the things there. And as I say, these are good general purpose SCSI adapters. I mean, it's not IBM SCSI and treated like that, but for having drivers and the ability to easily get a system set up with internal or external drives, they're typically a good go-to adapter. And so there's the identification for that, and it is a supported adapter. It's standard enough that the System Information Tool does identify it, know what it is. So looking at that disk information, this is going to be, and there's, because there's actually 2 drives that are installed, and I would have to look at the how that's terminated, but I mean on the boot screen it shows up as 2. No volume label, set right at 100 megabytes apparently. Available space is pretty close to like 32 megabyte, and I don't know which of those drives that is. Here, and so this may be even, be how the data is organized on the drive, or it's some odd thing, because I mean, a 1024 megabyte, that's effectively a gigabyte, and close to effectively 2 gigabyte of information here for the drive, which that, I mean, the Adaptec controller is able to support that, but I just don't, I'm not understanding that as well. Okay. So it did give the spoiler there of that 891 megabyte partition, and this is all from one drive. I don't know, you know, it's and maybe that size is probably the largest that the Adaptec controller can maybe do for a partition. Maybe a gigabyte sounds good, round number, without me looking at other detail. And of course, I can link the Adaptec page in the video description as well, in addition to all the other links I'm going to give. So let's look at the FAT partition, or effectively the DOS side of things. And see, that's funny that it OEM name MS Win 4.1. What in the world does it mean by that? I don't know. Or I don't know if that's a structure that's set up for how this other, and it went through and it booted to this, as it shows, it's bootable. And we get a little bit of detail there. I don't have any sort of login. I would hope that there'd be a generic login or something else. But that's what the other drive letters on device and nothing. So then there's another SCO Unix partition. And it's weird that partition is at the end of the 4 entries. And that just may be how that operating system is set up. And I kind of hate to run anything like that with the Unix side of Flavor without being able to log in and to basically go through a shutdown process for those operating systems. Much like the NetWare or something like that, going and giving it a down command or a just so it goes through and can shut the operating system down correctly and not corrupt anything. Is the reason that I don't want to necessarily start that up too many times, or just go through for a basic demonstration without me trying to go further and have some values I'm pretty certain would work for a login. And again, no idea of the origination of this device. And then there's my SIT boot disk, 1.44 megabyte diskette drive that I have to have hanging off the system for working drive. So we'll go through and look at the other things, and the keyboard information, that's the same thing that the Type 1 Model 80 gave. And really, so the Type 1 and Type 2 were typically close enough that there's some things that memory and things like that changed. How that's structured or can be set up behind the scenes. But really for that, it's just an increase in megahertz speed of the CPU. and I'm expecting not, to have the close to the same information as on the type 1 for this type 2 that's under test right now. Okay, so the system feature bytes information, second interrupt chip is present, real-time clock is present, wait on external event is unsupported, extended BIOS data area is allocated, system has a microchannel bus, DMA supports 24-bit address space, keyboard functionality call is unsupported, just like we saw with the type 1. Return POS data call is unsupported, just like we saw with the type 1 Model 80. Return memory map call is unsupported. Again, another match with the type 1. Enable disable processor functions call unsupported. Of course, just like the type 1 Model 80, it doesn't have a CPU or cache or anything else to that level that could that the BIOS could run in that way. 8042 keyboard controller in system. Data streaming is unsupported. SCSI subsystem not present on the system board. Information panel not installed. This is not an IML system. And SCSI support not in the IML image. So pretty much the same things as we saw for that type 1. We didn't load a mouse driver in this case. I didn't have a mouse driver on my diskette, even though I do have a mouse plugged in. Operating system information, DOS version 5. And I don't have anything other than the boot files. I mean, I don't have the quick basic to go through, or QBasic that was included with DOS 5.0 to be able to run that planar ID basic file. And maybe that'd be the thing. Grab the files from the type 1 and put them on this diskette for the type 2 and other systems to run those. Model and processor information. Okay. Wow. Interesting. And where it's got the F801 house revision, that system board, the planar ID, that FD10, that's odd. And then it's flagging the machine name and processor and coprocessor as unknown. So the supported systems, I mean, we went through earlier in the video and it detected that type 1 that's the first on the list just fine. So I'm wanting that those QBasic files, and I think it's going to be as easy. I mean, if you use the full screen edit program, you have to have the QBasic program on there, and it probably wouldn't hurt to have the edit program on the diskette as well. But I'm interested in what because the planar ID should be that FDFF, and it's not identifying this as any other supported model. And I do have another type 2. It might be interesting on the next video to go through and to run that one, or that maybe would have been the bare machine. And that's got a just a standard 386DX 20 megahertz and the math coprocessor in that one. No hard drives or anything else like that. I could go through and grab that one for the next video just to look at the bug angle. I mean, we're not going to see a matching planar ID to this. And it does mean me swapping the... So we do have, you know, an entry for the Type 3. I thought there was even a duplicate for one of the Type 1 or Type 2 systems on that list as well. I'll include the link, just like I did for the previous video, of this list of supported models. And we're going to go through, we're almost all the way through the system information tool, but we're just going to remember that FD10, why is it identifying that as the planar ID? And so the parallel and serial port information just shows a number of ports, one of each. SCSI information is there's not any IBM SCSI on this system. It has to be that for the system information tool. Just that Adaptec SCSI. So, and then video, we've got just that basic VGA stock that came on those early PS2s. So I thought that this would be covered very well in the system information tool, and we learned not. So I need to go through, power down things down again, swap things again, get the QBasic over to this diskette, get the and that should fit. Get the probably grab the edit program as well. Get it on the sit diskette, and then swap systems again. I'll get that exercise back to the Type 2, and we'll run the QBasic from diskette again to see if we can look at the planar ID with that program that we wrote with the on the prior video. So I will be back after I do all that. Okay, just starting up now. And we're still a little bit shy of a half-hour recording time. It wouldn't be so hard, except I've got to swap those diskettes, the diskette drives. And I wanted to make sure, as I ran through on that 60 megahertz Type 1 Mul 80, after copying the files, I wanted to make sure that the QBasic program would run. Here it's giving me something over the reference diskette. And if the planar ID was truly that far off, the reference diskette would not run. It would go through and it would identify it as a different system than what it is. So I wonder if there's we'll see what the reference diskette does. I noticed with the SCO Unix, and that's probably not Y2K compatible, but it didn't like the date that I gave it, the current date, later on. Okay, and we're going to do escape because we don't want to try and restore the configuration. We learn that that's a bust. Okay, so F8, configuration error, and we'll let it run the automatic configuration. I don't think I need to worry about. We'll see the date and time for the system information tool anyway. Because I don't have an autoexec.bat on that diskette, that sit diskette that's bootable. And so it prompts me for a time and date no matter what anyway. Just as a way to save perhaps a little bit of time. And this is one of the situations, again, it's throwing some curveballs at us. To get that system information tool in the drive very quickly, so it'll boot from that rather than the what's on the hard drive. I had time to spare anyway. But I wonder if the and what we'll try, we have that B version, the prior version before the planar ID stuff was modified, and we'll run that as a check too after we determine the planar ID and see what it says to that. If it's really that wigged out value, I don't know what's going on otherwise. I hope it won't prompt me for time and date or something. See, there's the Adaptec controller. There it's telling me about the, the hard drives it's identifying connected to that Adaptec controller. Okay, and as I say, and date looks good. Time looks good. Getting late. Ooh. Okay. So we're going to do the QBasic. I could have loaded the file from the command line, but that is one of the things. I mean, I didn't want to go through and swap things around again. I did test it from the diskette on the Type 1 Model 80. So we're going to do Alt F. And we can do O for open. I just arrowed down. And then tabbing. And you have to go through and arrow to get it to highlight. Okay, so there is our planar ID program that I typed in last night. Thank goodness I had the premonition to look ahead to maybe needing that in the future. An FD7E. Okay, maybe. I mean, that's different from what the system information tool was screening for it, and you have to recognize it goes through and it matches up entries in that table. And even in the case of like the P70, if you look through those supported machines, it even goes through and suppresses the planar ID of the P70, even though it has one. And there's a long drawn out thing that Major Tom has discovered in that regard for why it goes through and does suppress that. I have to look through. I'm trying to remember where it is in the listing. Maybe I'll have to put my glasses on, or maybe it will. I'll probably passed it up. I think it's towards the top. And it could be that the scrunch up screen just makes me not see things as much. Okay, see there's a IBM PS2 Model 80 at 22 hex BIOS submodel, and me and Tom talked about that too. Okay, there's the Model 70 P70. Okay, so let's look close to. Let me see if I can get it right at the very top there. Very top of the window. And it's got the BIOS model and BIOS submodel. But going through and on the planar ID, which is the fifth column, it just has 0. In other words, the system information tool is ignoring that value. And for the P70. And as we can see on the far right-hand column, just that 1 in there. This is originally the IBM list of supported models and how Major Tom extracted that data from the original version. And it only reported that one adapter slot. He was able to make, to correct that bug, and that was for the B revision. But I don't know why it's not that second entry, and that should be correct for that FDFF should be the appropriate value for the Type 2 Model 80. And here we're getting that FD7E. Okay. So pressing any key, that takes us back to the QBasic. We'll just do a Alt F exit to get out of the QBasic. Let's run the B version of the system information tool. FD7E. I have that other Type 2, and it might be handy to go through and see what that, and make sure that what planar ID that reports. See, and again, and maybe that's like the closest match or some other thing that thinks, or just an unknown hard-coded value that comes in. But this is going through, going through from one bug to the next. And pretty soon, just that going through and patching the system information tool is just going to be diminishing returns. It's not going to go, not going to be able to correct all the faults there. But it's interesting to get that planar ID. And I can do a little bit of searching on that. I have the second Type 2, no hard drives or anything else, but as long as I put a battery in there and configure it, we can boot from diskette. I mean, it's fine for not having a hard drive controller. Just a floppy-based system on our system information tool. But I'm not going to be able to pull that out for this time frame. So that'll be likely the next video that I'll do for that, just to see matching, if the planar D matches. As far as I know, all the BIOS, it's the same version of BIOS between both systems. And we can go a little bit further and see if we can figure out what that is going on here. So again, that really unusual content, but you know you're going to receive it on this channel. So if you enjoy it, click on that like button, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this content, get notified of that once the new videos come up. We need more subscribers. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.